And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring up the EPA Region 2 version 3 format and allow you to just take a quick pre-release peek at it. And again, part of the reason we're holding this is because we want to make sure that the documentation is up to date before we just release it, which is nice. Okay, so this is what we were looking at before. We have the initial submittal up here at the top. And again, we just group these all together so it's a little bit more obvious that this is the initial submittal. The files section here, this is what I was talking about, how you can add files to submit. Even though this is part of the initial submittal, because what they'd like to see in the initial submittal is a DXF file, you can submit photos, logs, the cover letter, anything like that in this section, and those are not dependent necessarily on populating the data provider site and location. So if you've already done an initial submittal and then you go back out and you I won't say resurvey, you go back out and the person who's doing the logs submits that data to you, you can submit the file just using this section here. Okay, it's not dependent on location, site, and data provider. Okay, the way this works is you right-click and say Add Rows, or you can come up to this file here and right-click and say Add Rows. Okay, and you basically just click on the file name. You browse to somewhere on your drive, and you can go ahead and select that file, add it to the file name. It'll automatically look at what the extension is, and you get some date information. Now, if you wanted to submit a log that was like in a PDF or something like that, and you wanted to associate that log with a location, what you would do is browse to that log, load it up here, then you come down to your place type and say, I'm going to assign a location to that, and you put in MW1 or whatever that location code is. And when that gets loaded in by EPA Region 2, it will be associated with that location. Now you notice that in that drop-down list, you also have the option of associating something with a sample. Okay, so you can submit facility-wide files, which would be like a DXF, a map, or you can submit files that are associated specifically with a location or specifically with a sample. Okay, and again, you can add as many rows as you want here, and the primary key here is just the file name, so it would have to be, you can't submit that same file twice. Okay, so I'm going to just show you a few items down here. I want to load in one set of data that has some errors, just so we can give you an example of how the errors are going to show up, and some possible solutions for resolving those. So I'm going to click on my basic location, and I'm going to say load my data. I'm going to come out to my desktop here, try to find it, and here's the file I'm going to load with errors. Now this is a data set that was received here at EPA and was returned because there were errors in it, and so this would not load. Now, had the person run this in EDP, they would have found that the water level section looks great and it loads. Oops, I've got my errors only on, that's why it's not showing. And the basic chemistry section contains errors. Now I know it contains errors because one, the section is red and the group header is red, meaning there's a problem in that group. Okay, I can also tell there's an error because the line column has the line number as red and bold. If I wanted to figure out exactly what the errors were, I could come up here and say produce an error log. I could also say I need to produce a summary, and the summary would be like if you had the same error reoccurring, it would say how many, it would give you the count of how many times that reoccurred. The error log gives you specifically row by row how many errors you have for this data set. Okay, so what we're seeing here is from the lab matrix. Now the folks who are in the room here, when you run this, you will not see this error because we updated this lab matrix code column, and as the teaching machine here, it wouldn't let me write to this drive, which is kind of interesting, but that's the way it is. So we had a comment earlier, how do you change this whole thing? Obviously this is incorrect and this is the problem. It wasn't showing which value it was supposed to show here. But I know this is really not supposed to be, what they're looking for here is the lab matrix code, which would be water or W or something along that line. And how do I change it here? The mass change would come under this find. I highlight the column, go to find and replace, hit my find and replace. Find what? I'm going to find WG and replace with W. And if I say replace all, it'll go out and replace that whole column with the value that's needed. Okay? So that's how you would do. You can do a find and replace by column. So there's a find and replace, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit so you can see where we have some errors. At the bottom here, we have the whole row is highlighted, and that's highlighted because it says, if you hover over it, it says there's a duplicate error, duplicate row error. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that it read in these first 44 rows, and when it got to row 55, it identified that this row here has been already loaded by EDP here. So let's try to look at this a little bit and figure out why is this an error. So I'm going to come up to my column chooser, and I'm going to just select some of the columns that would help me identify what's going on with this data set. I don't need the data provider. I'm going to remove the sample name. I want to keep the sample code, the location code, the matrix code, the sample type, and I'm going to remove the sample source. Now again, this is just removing it from the view. It's obviously not deleting it from the set because that wouldn't be good. So I'm going to condense this a little bit so it's easier for me to just look at my key fields, which will help me figure out why these are considered duplicate rows. Now you can remove as many of these as you like. Sometimes you need to get right to looking at the analyte or the cast number. So you may need to remove some additional fields, or you can slide these across as well if you want to rearrange them. Okay, but I'm just going to remove a couple of rows so I can see what's going on here. So the sample code for this whole deliverable here is the same. It's just this one sample code, 460-11510-1. And when I look at that and then look at my location code and my matrix and my sample code, if I scroll down just a little bit, I can see immediately we've got a lab replicate, we've got a matrix spike, and those are QC samples, but it's using the same sample code. Now that's incorrect. If you've got a lab replicate, that lab replicate would have a code as well. Now if the code is generated, if it's a lab QC where the sample is generated in the lab can put their lab sample ID code in here. Okay, and that's usually generated by their LIMS system or generated by their LIMS system, so they could put that in here, and that would be unique. But again, when you get down to matrix spike, that's another sample. So that would have its own unique syssample code. Okay? Now, as I scroll down some more, you can see this location code is 1008D. And if you keep scrolling down, you can see that the sample type is changing again. There's a matrix spike duplicate. And now we've got 1008F. And we've got PM-2. Again, it's all the same sample code, but it's a different location. So that is incorrect. That is not a unique sample for the location. Okay, you would not go out and go out and take a bunch of samples and call that sample the same exact sample code. Okay, it needs to be unique, and the location code sort of gives it away. You can also look at the sample type code, and you can look at the sample date. So if the sample date is 23 up here and it's 322 down below here, you know that can't be the same sample because it happens over different days. Now, if it's a sample where there is a duration involved, then that would need to be populated as a start and end duration. Okay? And that would be a sample that would need to have its own unique sample code as well. But there is the ability to track the duration of a sample if it's you want like the sumas, where you leave it going for a certain amount of time, and you need to make sure that you say how long that sumo ran. Okay, so this is something where when EPA Region 2 receives this file, they would give a recommendation on what they need to look at, but they certainly cannot go in and change this information or modify this sample code. And of course, I just did a search and replace on the lab matrix code. That was for demonstration purposes. EPA Region 2 does not go in and modify the data. That's not what they're here to do. So that's why the data, when it comes into them, has to be a package, and it has to be a package that will load where everything is green, such as this. Obviously, you can send a data package and say, I can't figure out why this is causing a problem. Can you help me with this? But that would not be your submittal. You can't just go, I made my, I submit it to them, I'm done. That would be more of an inquiry. How do I deal with this? Okay? Some of the other things we see when in the lab, sometimes it won't have the comment, the row header here set up as a comment, and so it causes an error. And if you click on this, you can set this up as a comment field. Okay. For the EPA Region 2 format, the comment field is designated with a £. Okay, and that can be set up as a preference in the format, but the way EPA Region 2 and 3 are handling it is they're using the £. Okay, the way you would load the format file, when you get to loading an action level, you come up to this little icon up here. It says Format. Basically click on that. You browse to where you have your file, and you basically select the EPA R2.xse. Okay. You may see other files in here, but the actual format file is this XSE. The other files in that folder are sort of supporting files, and those include the reference values, as we discussed earlier, and some of the other files that contain the logic for handling the conditional checks and that type of thing. Okay, the errors only will allow you to basically do just that. It will filter the data in this grid to show you only the rows where there are errors. So if you have a really large data set and you don't want to scroll left, scroll right, scroll up and down, try to figure out what you have, hit your errors only, and that'll just bring just the problem errors to the display. Now, if your error is that you have duplicate rows, you usually need to look at all your data so you can figure out where and why it's duplicate. The other items in this under the View menu here allow you to just do standard. This is basically the same way Excel works. The pin the columns, filtering. You can filter on specific data here in the columns. Trying to figure out what you have for sample codes, matrix codes. You can look at just your QC data. Okay, when you're ready to produce or package up your data set, your EDD, this little button up here, the application menu, click on that. And your sign and submit is right there. When you, if you need to put in your registration keys, here's your registration key. You paste again, those will be emailed to you. You paste your registration keys in there. Okay? When you've finished making all your changes, like if you went in and corrected these errors, you need to save the file before you create your package. So you want to make sure that you come in and say, save my file, save my EDD, and it'll prompt you where you want to save it. And basically you can just save that file as however you decide you want to save it, but it needs to be saved before you create your package. You certainly don't want to lose the changes you made by not saving it. Okay, if you had, this was part of I think one of the comments we had earlier, if I received data from 2 different labs and I wanted to bring that information in to this particular data set, I could come in here and say, append another data set to the one that we have already loaded. And then you can save it and submit it from there. If you have a field crew going out and you want to make sure that they have some of the information from the format, you can go ahead up to this little icon in the top right here that says blank EDD. Click on the blank EDD, import the information to Excel, and it basically just gives you the header and the text, and if you hover over this, it'll give you the description as it appears in the format. So I'm going to go down to location. Okay, and again, this comes right out of the format. So whatever it says for a description in the format, that's what you will see here. Okay, now this prints out, or this creates a file that has all the sections in the format. You can certainly hide these sections that you're not using, or remove them from the Excel spreadsheet if that allows you to simplify it a little bit for the folks that you need to send this to. And we've seen people take this sort of one step further, where they include the reference values with a drop down here for the units and other values. The other thing that might be nice is to populate the location codes so that the field crew know your naming scheme, and gives them just a little bit more information about the locations that they'll be sampling at and the naming scheme that's expected. Okay, the description, EDD description, and you'll see that this is formatted a little bit differently. It basically allows you to look at, in a spreadsheet, the primary keys, whether the field's required, kind of gives you a summary, and it also includes the description on the right-hand side here. Okay, so if I wanted to clear this and add a new file after I modified it, you can clear just this table, or you can clear the whole EDD. So if I select clear the whole EDD, clear all, it'll clear the whole set there. Okay, and then you can go back in and reload that the new set that's been fixed. Okay, so if you are in, let's say you loaded this set of data in and you were not sure about a code, you can come to this first tab here that says reference values, and you can see here that we have the codes for the cast numbers, but we also have the chemical name, and you can sort on that and look for naming conventions, similarities, that type of thing. Okay, all the reference values that are supported by this format are on this table, so you can go in and look at, I think the horizontal method was the one that we were talking about earlier. Okay, and there's the codes for your horizontal method. Okay, so that's one more resource to check the valid values. A lot of the drop-down lists just contain this code, and if you haven't memorized that 027 is unknown, you may not know that, so you can always come here and give it a quick check while you're in the application instead of having to go and pull out your documentation and flip through that or search through that. Okay, that's all I was going to show here. The tool, again, is meant to be a simple tool. It gives you the capability of checking your data before you submit it to EPA, and that's a necessity. It will be rejected if these data packages don't come in clean, meaning that all sections are green, all sections are go.